Hello and welcome or welcome back to the Wool Sea Knitting channel. My name is Rachel and this is everything that I knit in 2024. This video is a little late because I was originally not planning to film it. I was a little insecure about my knitting finished object pile to show you guys, especially compared to a lot of other creators who are just able to produce a lot more than I do, and I thought, is this going to be entertaining to people? I came to the conclusion that one, honesty is best. It's good to show, I think, a range of what a year in knitting can look like. Not all of us are going to do 15 sweaters in a year. It's totally fine that some people do. It's quite admirable, but I thought it might be good to reflect a year in knitting that might look like a lot more of your guys's, which is a bunch of accessories, 3 sweaters, a bunch of gifts, etc. And I also think it's good to take a moment to look back on and discuss with hindsight knitting projects, because I think podcasts and knitting YouTube in general is a lot more focused on like immediacy and recency and I just finished this, these are my initial reflections type content. So I see the outline of this video as brief summary of my goals and if I achieved them, overview of all the projects that I have to show you from this year that I still own, and number 3, reflections on this year of knitting. So number 1, my goals. In terms of concrete goals for knitting, I only had 2 last year. One was a resounding success and the other was a resounding failure, and I do think that these two things are linked. So number 1 was knit down 1,000 grams of yarn from my stash, so to be net negative 1,000 grams by the end of 2024. This was the resounding failure. I'm now at 2,263 grams more in stash at the end of 2024 than I had at the beginning of 2024. And that's a little tricky because when I count stash down, I don't include whips. So for example, I have 600 grams of yarn counted as yarn that I bought to immediately start a cardigan for my grandfather, but I hadn't finished it in 2024. So there's like 600 grams in that's immediately counted out for the beginning of 2025 tracking, but it's not going to be precise. I had to decide on some rules for tracking, and that's one of them. So that was the resounding failure. The resounding success was this was definitely a year of gift knitting for me. And I stated that at the beginning of last year, that that's what I wanted and that's what I planned and expected. However, one thing that I didn't really think about going in was a lot of those gifts were really big projects and really time-consuming projects, and ones that people either gave me the yarn from their stash to make for them, or I bought specifically for that project, while at the same time continuing to buy yarn at a rate, assuming that I would be knitting the same amount that I had in previous years when I was overall just a lot more homebound and had a lot more time to devote to knitting. This year I didn't, and that's normal and fine. We're going to have ebbs and flows and life changes, but those combination of factors I think led to, I did a lot of gift knitting and also at the same time steadily increased my stash throughout the year, even though that is exactly contrary to what one of my goals was. To remedy this in the future, I am still looking forward to knitting things for other people in 2025. However, I really want it to be almost exclusively using yarn that I already have. Moving forward, I am prioritizing stuff from stash, gifts, stuff for me, regardless. It's going to be stuff coming from that closet right behind me. In terms of the breakdown of projects, if I tracked everything correctly, I completed 21 knitting, okay, that's not true, 20 knitting projects and 1 crochet project. Out of those 21 total, 10 were gifts. And the other 11, I have 10 to show you, I think. If I'm counting correctly. One of them I lost, I can tell you that right now. Okay, so to get started, I knit 3 sweaters. One of the first things that I finished in 2024 was a project that I'd actually started at the end of 2023, but was continually sidelined for all my holiday gift knitting and then the gift knitting that I did throughout the winter. And that is my Storm sweater by Petite Knit. I knit the second size, which was sizing down for my bust size. My measurements will be at the bottom of the description box if that's something that you find useful while watching these sorts of things. And I'm happy that I sized down. I really like the fit of this. I think it's still boxy, but suits me well. And I knit this in Long Way Homestead DK. Long Way Homestead is a Canadian brand. They're mostly a mill, but they do produce a lot of their own yarn. This was a mix of a bunch of different Canadian wool breeds, not just Canadian, but like sheep in Canada, nearby the mill, Longway Homestead. And this is the DK, and I got it in the undyed color because A, it was a little bit cheaper, and B, because I wanted this to be a sort of fresh or more modern version of the classic fisherman knit sweater. Obviously, fisherman knits are cables, and this is all just knit and purl texture, but I wanted a similar effect, and I think that I got it. I found that these knit purl blocks were very fun. It meant that I could see my progress quickly and feel the momentum and keep it going. I enjoyed the breaks of garter. A, just visually looking at it, I think it's a nice touch, and B, because it was like a reset between all of these. And I also just think that it was a great thing to keep me interested and occupied the whole time. And this also spent some time out in the naughty corner because I was really unhappy with the first version of the finished object that I did. I originally knit this 2 blocks of texture or pattern longer than it currently exists with, because I thought that I wanted it to be like cozy and oversized and long and hitting at the tops of my thighs, but it just wasn't looking right. Part of that was because of this yarn. I don't know what quality of the yarn I would use. Maybe just I would say it has really good memory, because when I first blocked this, I noticed that the texture in my gig swatch like bloomed gorgeously when I got this wet. It's woolen spun, opened, it became a lot fluffier. It looked almost like wiry beforehand. And another thing that I didn't notice when I knit a gig swatch and blocked it flat is that this creases when it's wet and will not let go of that crease. So I made this a lot longer and then I laid it flat to dry. And then when I tried it on, it had these really aggressive creases along the sides that made me look so strange, and like steaming it and like manipulating it when it was dry would do nothing to fix it. And so the combination of the really awkward length on me plus this sort of like, I don't even know how to describe it. I kind of felt like a manta ray. It really didn't suit me, and it made me feel really bad because this project took months of off and on knitting. It was like the one thing I was working on for myself in that time. It took so much of my time, and to have it go towards, and this was like expensive yarn that was really special to me. I got it at a festival with a friend the year prior, and it felt like it was just very disappointing. So what I decided to do is something that I love to do, which is cut into my knitting and then graft it back together to fix it, and that worked. So I cut out 2 blocks. I used Afterthought lifelines. I cut into my knitting about here and removed the sections that were too long and then grafted it back together using the grafting stitch that you'd use at like the top of a toe, for example. And that went really well. And then I reblocked it, but I just kind of kept zhuzhing it around and manipulating it so that it couldn't form any aggressive creases like it did the first time. And now this is something that I love. I reach for this a lot whenever I'm going out in cold weather to anywhere other than the office. Maybe you could tell because my last 2 videos were filmed in this, but I am very happy that I took the time to fix this sweater as opposed to just letting it languish as a testament to my failure to choose the proper length and block things nicely. And I've now learned that to be careful when I'm blocking things, that I'm not like pressing seams in accidentally unless that's a look I'm going for. Another thing you'll see is I knit the folded part, the inside part of the neckband, in a different yarn because this is scrap yarn that's super, super soft, and this is a little bit rougher and I have a sensitive neck. So I put that in instead. You can also see that towards the end of sewing this down, I started doing it sort of slanted and in the wrong spot. I only noticed afterwards, but my hair almost always covers that collar, so it is what it is. I just wasn't willing to fix another thing with this. I thought the pattern was clear. I think it's a little funky that 2 of the middle sizes are the exact same. I mean, the exact same finished measurements, the exact same instructions, the exact same charts, etc. I also get a lot of questions about the sleeves. A lot of people ask if it's like the Ingrid sweater, which I have heard has given people trouble because the decreases break the pattern blocks. It doesn't here. You do them all in the garter rows so that every time you get to another one of these, if you did the decreases properly, your pattern knit purl stitches will still line up. I enjoyed knitting this pattern. I found the breaks of garter to be nice little mental refreshes, and these became quickly easy to memorize, and it was very easy to see progress and feel momentum, even when I was like dropping this for weeks at a time, picking it back up later. My mother then wanted one of these, so that's one of the gift sweaters that I made. I've talked about it in recent podcasts. Yeah, I feel like that's a testament to how enjoyable a pattern this is that I was willing to knit it twice in a year, and it's a big one. So that's my first finished sweater of 2024 for myself that I still have to show you. My first finished accessories were a pair of these fluffy DK weight socks. I only have the one because, if I'm honest, I fished this out of the laundry basket to show you because I wear these. The only time these are not in the laundry basket is when they've just come out of the wash and I have put them back on my feet. I knit this out of a single skein of Knitting for Olive soft silk mohair in this like dark navy color, and then a skein of merino singles that my boyfriend got me ages ago, and I love them. They're super fast because it's a DK weight sock. I think it's something like a 40 or 42 stitch circumference, and they're so squishy, they're soft, they're great on my feet, and I wear them around the house a lot up until they get dirty, and then they get in the bin, and then I wash them, and then I immediately put them back on. I understand that mohair is considered a good alternative to nylon in increasing the strength of socks, but I love these so much that I don't want to test it by wearing them in boots. So what I usually do is I wear them around the house, and then they get a little stretched out, and then I wear them over a pair of cotton socks around the house one more day, and then I wash them. And that works out really well for me. Did that. Highly recommend. If you have leftover mohair and fingering weight yarn, make yourself a pair of house socks, or give them as gifts if you trust that people can wash them well. They're really, really fast. They're a good way to get used to knitting socks if you're nervous about the techniques or you think that working on 2.25 or 2.5 millimeter sock needles would be too fiddly. And it's a great way to use up little bits of scraps that you have because those did not take a lot of yarn at all. You could definitely use most of a ball of mohair that you have left from a project and you just don't know what to do with. I don't have a lot to say about those, but they are amongst the most worn of my finished objects of the last year. Another contender for most worn is my swirl mittens, which is a self-drafted pattern of mittens because I was just really excited to use my hand spun. I started spinning last year, which is part of the reason why there's a lot of yarn in my yarn in category because I can't any finished hand spun in my yarn in, but here are my mittens. I have written one is longer than the other. I have written most of the pattern and then other people have tested some of the sizes, and I was going to release this, but I have become very insecure about that and really nervous about like missing something massive and doing a really bad job. One of these is the prototype. You can tell because, yeah, there's like a mismatch in the color here, but I fixed that with this one, mostly. And these are fun. I wear these almost every day because I live in a cold climate. I am not very confident in my instructions, and I'm not very confident in my yardage estimations. And so I have two 50-gram skeins of yarn that I got traveling over the summer that I think would make a really cute pair of these. So once I'm done a lot of my current whips, I'm just going to test my own pattern. Since I wrote it and edited it like 6+ months ago, it's not at the front of my brain. I think I will be able to edit it a lot more efficiently and double check my gauge and yardage calculations and also have a second pair to show you that isn't in my like really messy and bobbly hand spun, which kind of makes them look it makes the pattern look worse, I think. Like, I love these. Like I said, I wear these almost every day. Whenever I go to work, whenever I'm out in the snow, whenever I'm doing anything, I'm wearing my mittens. And I really love the design, but I want to make sure that if I'm giving this to other people, even if I'm not charging for it, they can trust it. And I want to test it one more time before I like let it out into the world and give you guys the expectation that you can do something like this. So yeah, I made these swirl mittens. I was really proud of them. And this was good because I think for me, one of the things I was feeling a lot last year is I really wanted to be knitting, but I didn't know what I wanted to be knitting. A lot of patterns just suddenly didn't call to me. Self-drafting kind of had been the antidote to that at a few different points in the year. So I'm really grateful. Other points it was gift knitting. It was because I find that I always want to be knitting. I just don't always want to have more stuff. Next, we have a hat that I lost, and I'm really upset about that because it was my favorite hat that I had made myself, and that was something that I, again, had to really do a lot to fix in the end of project phase. I made it in a superwash, and then I blocked it, and then it was huge. It was like a bonnet. It was hanging around my chin. And then I wet it again. I threw it in the dryer. I progressively, like I would take it out every 5 minutes and double check the shaping of it and make sure. And I ended up with this like slightly felted, super warm, pretty, hand-dyed hat that I loved. I had Frankensteined a bunch of hat patterns that I loved into one pattern. It was like 3 layers of wool around my ears. It was the brim size that I liked. It was the instructions from Lily Kate France's pattern combined with the head sock, which I love, and a couple of techniques that I picked up along the way and certain crown decreases. It was an excellent hat. It was in my favorite colors, and I lost it. I lost it sometime early this fall. I hope whoever found it around the streets of Ottawa really appreciates it. I miss that hat. I actually get upset thinking about it. It was like my perfect hat. I know I could make another one, but I don't know how many of those instructions for Rachel's perfect hat I wrote down. I think I remember most of them, but I'm just not ready yet. So I know I said I wasn't going to focus on patterns that I couldn't show you, but I'm going to, pour one out for my hat. I miss you. I hope you're living a good life somewhere, and I really love that hat. Continuing with the theme of accessories, I knit so many self-striping pairs of socks. This is a vanilla stockinette sock. I spent a lot of time kind of perfecting my perfect vanilla sock this year using a variety of self-striping yarns. That was something that just, sparked a lot of joy for me. I work on these usually during my lunch break at the office. I find them portable, they're easy for public transit, they're pretty mindless. I've always enjoyed knitting socks. I like the variety in the process, even when it's basic. You do the cuff, then you have a little break of stockinette, then you have the fun heel flap and gusset, then you basically just have a straight shot until the toe. And doing it in all of these fun self-striping colorways kept that really fresh and engaging for me. And my feet are always cold. In the winter, I'm often wearing 2 pairs of socks, one cotton and then one woolly pair on top. And I really like them in boots. They keep my feet warm. I really wanted to continue working down my stash of sock yarn. And I don't know, there was just something about the easiness of the self-striping sock that appealed to me this year during a lot of travel, during a lot of gift knitting or more focused knitting. It was nice to have something that I knew every lunch I could get 2 rows done on, and it would kind of emerge for me as like a little treat to see what the repeat was going to look like. And I can always use more socks quickly to go over all the self-striping pairs of socks I made this year. I made for myself 4 pairs. The first was this, and this is Play at Life colors. I got this in the secondhand yarn donation bin at Knitomatic in Toronto, just one of my preferred yarn stores. So I was there picking up yarn for something else, and I saw this colorway. I think it's called Only Happy When It Rains. And I don't know if that dyer is still active or doing self-striping yarns. I looked, and over the summer it didn't seem that way. I'll keep everything linked down below just in case. This for me feels almost Seussian. I like that there's these stripes of the darker purpley blue and then the variegated one in between. I see the rainy day inspiration. I like that the color stripe size meant that the blocks at the heel were kind of chunky and somehow stayed pretty uniform even as I was doing the toe decreases. And this kind of kickstarted my year of self-striping socks. So this is the only one that's not a Tiny Human Knits colorway. I got this, secondhand. I think this was $15 for the skein, which isn't that inexpensive, but considering hand-dyed self-striping yarn often goes for $32 for 100 grams, I thought it was a good price. I love Knitomatic, and the proceeds go towards a shelter, so that felt like a win on many fronts for me. Other ones in chronological order that I did, these are both Studio Ghibli colorways. This is Kiki's Delivery Service. This is Soot Sprites from Spirited Away. And I knit these at the same time on the same needle. I did 2 at a time these 2, and then 2 at a time these 2, because I was just craving 2 at a time sock knitting. I like to vary how I knit my socks to keep that interesting. I find that to be really fun. And so I didn't want to have to meticulously split the 50-gram balls of the self-striping in two. So I just did one of these and one of these. And so by the time I was done, I had 2 pairs of socks. But for a long time, I had just single unmatched socks floating around my house. And this was my lunchtime knitting for pretty much all of summer and part of the fall. And I wore these on Halloween to the office as part of my little witch outfit. And then last and finished most recently, I had my folklore socks, another Tiny Human Knits colorway. I completely ran out of yarn on these. My typical vanilla sock recipe is 2.25 millimeter needles and 60 stitch circumference. And then I pick up a little bit more on the heel flap, so I have a bigger gusset because I have a really wide foot. And then I decrease back down to 60, but I have a lot of space up here. And then I decrease the toe until 20 stitches, and then I graft it together. However, I cast on with the wrong size needle for these and I didn't realize. So I was doing 60 stitches on a 2 millimeter needle. So these are denser. And they also were using yarn at a faster rate because that's what happens when you're knitting at a tighter gauge. So I increased after the ribbing to a 64 stitch and then did all of this in a 64, but that meant that I really ran out, and the toe is actually knit in the contrast color of the second sock. So I knit these one at a time on 9-inch circulars. I got a lot of enjoyment out of these this year, a lot of satisfaction and a lot of peace and comfort from making these. And I have more self-striping sock yarn in stash. It's all Patons Croy, so I imagine very soon I will continue to show you self-striping socks in 2025. Around the same time that I started my parade of self-striping all stockinette socks, I cast on my next sweater, which is this one. It is the Yanni by Orlan Souk, and I really enjoyed it. And this is a worsted weight saddle shoulder construction that has a really an intentional, really boxy fit. And I found this to be a lot of fun to make. I love the look of a saddle shoulder. I think it suits my frame as a short person better than a strict drop shoulder, which cuts me off right here and highlights my stubby little arms. I like the elegance of the line flowing from the neck directly, and the different rates of increasing here and the short row shaping made for a very refreshing knitting experience after a knitting history of mostly drop shoulder and raglans. I still love a drop shoulder and a raglan, but it was nice to use some slightly different constructions this year. It has something of an 80s feel to me. I think it's maybe the boxy intentional crop. This sits around my belly button and has these long sleeves. I skipped a bunch of the decreases in the armpit because my armpit's up here, the sweater armpit's down here. I was risking not being able to, lift my arms, and that just suited my frame better. But this was a really fast project, I think, because it's so cropped and because it's a worsted weight yarn. It goes by really quickly. Like, once you finish the yoke, you've done the vast majority of the work. I knit this in another yarn that I got from the Knit-O-Matic donations pile. I saw it and I couldn't pass it up. It was Olan Mills Merino worsted, and in the color Slow. Olan Mills had ceased operations, I think, a few months prior, and it felt like the only opportunity I was going to get to work with their product. And it was at a discount, again, for a good cause, and a color that I loved in a sweater quantity that I thought could make work, and I did. I even have a little bit left over. The one thing is I didn't alternate skeins, and you can kind of tell there's a line around where I separated for sleeves, and then one sleeve is a lot more variegated than the other, and then the yoke. But I didn't notice until almost the end, and I don't really mind. It's something that I think is kind of funny. I think it suits me. It's a classic. I struggled with the arm decreases a lot. I think I ripped out the arms, the first arm I did, about 4 separate times. But because it's so short, and because it's pretty narrow compared to the rest of the body, it went by really, really quickly. I just couldn't get a rate of decreases that I liked for a while. I followed the patterns originally, and then I ended up with decreases that were done too fast, and then a really stubby like forearm. So I think I ended up doing, I just did the math for how many rows based on the other times I had knit the sleeve I was going to be doing, and then I divided the increases up equally amongst those and ended up with something that I really like. That it gives me a little bit of waist definition, but is still really just cozy and a throw-on thing, and I wear this as a sort of alternative to a sweatshirt. It's almost even like that dark gray sweatshirt color with a lot more dimension. In multiple ways, this feels like a basic plus in terms of construction and knitting experience. It was a lot of stockinette, but with interesting design details like the statement cast-off choice, the picked-up collar, which adds stability, and the lines of the whole thing. But it's still overall still a very straightforward sweater. I liked the instructions. It made me interested in other Orlan Souk patterns just because I found this to be very reliable. And it's a basic plus in how the actual finished object looks and can be styled. I finished this right at the beginning of summer, so I didn't actually get to wear this very much until several months after finishing it. And I'm happy that even with the recency bias having faded, I still really enjoy this. Oh, okay. Changing in and out of that sweater destroyed my ponytail. But next, I have my third and final garment to show you that I made in 2024, which is the top I am wearing right now. This is the Beauty School top by Poison Girl Knits, and it's the only pattern from this year that is not size inclusive, which sucks because it's a nice pattern. It is this faux set-in sleeve, vintage-inspired blouse top that I knit in Orso Yarn Co. yarn that I got the same time I got the yarn for the storm sweater, which was Knit City Montreal 2 years ago, and in the fingering weight blue-faced Leicester base. And this took me like 4.5 months to make because it's fingering weight. I made some mistakes at the beginning, and it was summer, and I just kind of took this with me everywhere, and I didn't mind that it took a long time, and I have plans to make another one. I like the shaping of the arms. You do these really aggressive short rows for the entire sleeve cap to kind of reorient this whole thing so it points downwards. I really like that look. I like that I chose to cut it off above my elbows because I knew I didn't have enough yarn, and I preferred the look of it sitting here than I did just below, which is about where I would have ended up if I had used every scrap of this yarn left. I think I get the vintagey, blousey look that I was going for, and I like the silhouette so much that I don't even mind that the undertones of this yarn don't really suit my personal coloring. It's a little bit more cream in person. I don't know how much that's coming up on camera, and I do better in cool tones, but I love it. For a long time, I was working on this, thinking I was going to give it to a friend who looks better in warm tones than me, and then I tried it on after I finished it, and I said, I'm so sorry, I'm keeping this. This pattern has a lot of instructions for optional modifications. I chose the mock neck out of the 3 or 4 neckline options. I chose actually my own sleeve length option. I did a few increases as I was going into the ribbing to give it a bit more of a puffy shape. In hindsight, I think I could have done even more. I think there's like 3 or 4 different waist shaping options, and I went for minimal waist shaping and the cropped length. And it sits around just below my belly button, which again feels very like sort of 50s vintage. I like it. I actually wear this one to work. I feel like this goes with my work wardrobe pretty well, and it's a silhouette that works in my office environment. And the colors are not too out there when I pair it with a more toned down pant and shoe option. And I just think it's a really classic silhouette. I like that the broader shoulders feel like it opens up my chest a little bit and makes me look like I have better posture than I do. I think I would probably modify that for my next one because I want to make it in a darker yarn, and I wouldn't get a lot of the benefit from that, and instead I would move it to just sit slightly more perfectly where a set-in shoulder that actually fit better would sit, which is closer to the apex of my shoulder up here. But that's such a tiny, tiny issue that I don't actually consider to be an issue in this garment. I also knit this, I think, a little off gauge. I think I knit this at a tighter gauge than was recommended because I didn't like the fabric at the gauge that was suggested, and then I went up 2 sizes and then did a few like fiddling with stitch counts here and there when I felt was appropriate. And all of those gambles paid off, thankfully, and gave me something that overall I really like. I only had 2 skeins of the fingering weight to get out of this, and I think that this is a pattern that's meant to sit at 0 to -2 inches of ease, and I have this sitting at like 0.5 inches of positive ease, and because of that, like that sizing choice, it's going to be a little bit bigger here to get what I wanted here, and that is a deal that I'm happy with. I just don't like tight-fitted sweaters in wool. It feels just kind of counterintuitive. I want a base layer most of the time between myself and the wool, A, so I don't have to wash my sweaters as often, and B, because I have sensitive skin. I find that this is not a soft yarn, but after a few minutes of wearing it, especially if I'm out of the house, I kind of forget that as it heats up to my body. So this is a nice exception, but not something that I want to make the norm. I prefer for layering, going in and out of really cold outside and then artificially heated insides, that I like the ability to layer. And this is really more of an autumn fall piece just because my arms are exposed anyway. But overall, yeah, this is something that I really thought was going to be a fail and then ended up being a success. And I would like to make another one in the cashmere navy yarn that I unraveled from my father's old sweater at this point over 2 years ago, and just haven't gotten around to it because I'm intimidated to work with that yarn. The last 2 of the things that I still have to show you include this baby hat that still has an end unwoven using some of the leftovers from this pair of socks. Someone in my life had a baby and I knit them a sweater, a stuffed toy, an octopus. Highly recommend that pattern if anyone's interested. And then also this hat, but by the time I got to mailing them those things, I figured that their baby was too big for the hat, because I had made the sweater in, I think, the 6 to 9 month size, but this is a newborn to 3 month size baby hat, and I think I remember being told that the baby was a large baby, and that I figured that this hat would just kind of end up being useless junk in their house, so I decided to save it for an upcoming baby because they're starting to be born in my life. And this is a merino and nylon superwash mix. It's soft, it's kind of fun, and I don't know, I feel like it's gender neutral. And I just think it's good to start stockpiling easy assortment of baby gift knits that I can give to people who want them. And last of the things that I have, I'm going to show you just very briefly my single crochet project from the entire year, which is a little Junimo from Stardew Valley. But I'm going to talk about him at length in my upcoming podcast, and I kind of don't want to steal the joy from future Rachel and getting to talk about it, because it's my only finished object that I will have to show you for that podcast. So I don't want to go too in-depth on him. But this is also going to be a gift. I just haven't given it yet because I have to put in the wire to make the little antenna stand up. And that's everything I made this year that I still have to show you. Some things that I made that I really enjoyed that I gave away as gifts. I really like making small stuff for babies. It's just so satisfying, and the finished objects are so cute. I am quite committed to the baby Ozetta pattern by the Knit Pearl Girl for baby gift sweaters, and I find it such a great way to use up soft acrylic blend machine wash scraps, which I do occasionally have left over from gift knits for other people in my life. I really liked knitting that octopus as well. It was cute, it was fast, it was great for scrap busting, and it felt like something actually useful for a baby. I always ask in advance if people actually want sweaters for their babies or hats or other little things, but I feel like they have the ability to grow out of that so much faster, and it's a lot harder to accurately size, as opposed to a toy where there's probably always going to be a time where they can use it. So I'm going to be doing maybe more toys in the future than necessarily hats or socks, but it was still fun to make that tiny hat out of scraps. I thought it was fun to spend a lot of time making sweaters for other people this year because I had a bit of a crisis of inspiration in knitting for a lot of 2024 that was bubbling under the surface. I don't know if I really concretely identified that until quite late in the year. But even though for a long time I didn't know what I wanted to have as a final thing for myself, I still wanted to be knitting pretty much anytime I was sitting and not working or cooking or doing anything like that. And so having these gift knits allowed me to keep having that as a hobby that I love while just sorting through the fact that I have a lot of sweaters. I was seeing a lot of patterns that were so beautiful and trends that were coming out in knitting that were so interesting to look at, but not things that I wanted to own. And I was starting to feel hemmed in by clutter and things. And I don't know, almost no garment patterns called out to me this year and said, you have to make me, I'm going to fit so well in your life, I'm going to be so much fun to make. So all these gift knits allowed me to channel my love of knitting without contributing to random crap. And instead, I saw a lot more inspiration in ready-to-wear pieces, or just things from my brain this past year. So I'm excited to kind of maybe put effort into bringing some of those ideas into fruition in 2025. But the 3 sweater patterns that I did make, I love, and I'm really happy that I made, but I'm happy that I didn't go overboard and make things for the sake of making them for myself, because I think I would be a lot unhappier in this roundup. And I also gave away a few things this year. I gave away a blue sweater that I was going to unravel to my mother and then spent some time lengthening all of it because it was too short for her. I gave away my silk cumulus tee that I had knit the summer before to a friend because it just didn't fit right, and I associated a lot of like bad memories with it because I hurt my wrists while making it. And that freed up some space in my brain and in my closet, and that made me feel good about continuing to make garments for myself. And I spent some time sewing and I spent some time spinning, and those felt like a nice use of creative energy as well. I think it's okay that I just kind of only have a bunch of socks to show you guys. I love knitting, but there's going to be years where there's just nothing that appeals to me to have in my house as a statement piece or a long-term investment of time and money in terms of making and then also keeping that item and storing it. And I'm happy with what I made. I'm happy that I was selective with what I made. I think that paid off for me. I am very relieved to see that my knitting inspiration has come back. There are some patterns that I've seen that I love and want to make. There are some ready-to-wear pieces that I want to recreate or find patterns that I can use to recreate. And I'm really excited about prioritizing gift knits from stash yarn. So that's what I made this past year. Please let me know if any of this resonated with you. If you made it this far, thanks so much for being here, and I'll see you again soon.